Hey guys, tonight, we're heading into the shadowy halls of an ancient Ethiopian monastery, where the night air is cool, and 1,000 tiny noises crickets, distant jackals. The soft hush of monks' sandals echo off stone walls. You stand there in the flickering candlelight, the heavy scent of beeswax and old parchment filling your nose, and you realize there's no such thing as a comfy mattress here. Just straw mats, hard stone, and the collective sense that everyone is just a little too awake for comfort. Outside, the mountains are blue-black silhouettes against a sky so packed with stars you feel like the whole world is holding its breath. Inside, you and a dozen other monks shuffle from prayer to prayer, trying to keep eyelids from drooping, toes from going numb, and ancient chants from blending together in a sleep-deprived haze. Honestly, you probably won't survive this if you're hoping for a full night's rest. Let's just be real. In this place, sleep is not a guarantee. Monastic life in the highlands means endless prayers, brutal cold, and a near-constant battle against exhaustion, made only slightly easier by the hum of companionship, and the hope that maybe tonight, you'll stumble upon something that'll keep you awake a little longer than last night's tepid barley water. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how many night owls and time zone wanderers join these sleepy journeys from every corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip into the monastery's routine. The wooden beams overhead are black with centuries of smoke, and the stone floor is cold even through your woven sandals. The prior's candle wobbles in the night breeze, casting a golden glow over his lined face as he calls the assembly for midnight prayers, a tradition designed, some say, to ensure no one ever gets a solid 8 hours of sleep. You take your place on the mat, knees already aching, and murmur the prayers you know by heart. But tonight, your mind drifts. You hear the distant, weirdly rhythmic clatter of something outside, goats maybe, or just your brain inventing sounds because it desperately wants something to focus on. This is the 9th century after all. There are no alarm clocks, no mobile phones, no coffee, at least not yet. You rely on rooster crows and the insistent nudges of your fellow monks to keep you from nodding off during the second recitation of the Psalms. Historians agree that Ethiopian monasteries followed a rigid schedule: 3 hours of prayer, 2 hours of silent meditation, another round of prayer all night long. But there are also those who insist the routines were less strict, that some monks sneaked off for catnaps, or even the occasional midnight snack. You shift your weight, trying not to crack your back too loudly. The air is so dry your throat itches, and you silently wish someone would invent a decent beverage to make these vigils more tolerable. But no one has, at least not yet. There are rumors among the novices that one of the brothers has a secret stash of wild berries that might help you stay awake. But that sounds about as likely as getting an extra blanket on a cold night, something only the truly favored would ever enjoy. It's during one of these endless vigils that you first notice a faint, earthy smell wafting in through the cracks of the monastery door. You make a note to investigate after prayers, anything to break up the monotony. You wonder if it's just more goats, or if maybe, just maybe, you're about to witness the beginning of something world-changing right here on these chilly flagstones. As you shuffle off to your tiny cell, you overhear one of the older monks muttering about those possessed goats again. You roll your eyes. Old brother Johannes says that about anything that moves faster than a tortoise. Still, you can't help but wonder if there's something to the story. Maybe tonight is the night you discover the secret to surviving these endless Ethiopian nights, something that will change not only the way you live, but the way the whole world wakes up. You wake to the sunrise, the sky streaked pink and gold above the stone monastery. The cold still clings to your skin, and you feel like you've barely closed your eyes because, well, you have barely closed your eyes. But outside there's a flurry of unexpected activity. The shepherd boy Caldi, who usually looks as energetic as a damp sack of lentils, is waving his arms and hopping from foot to foot at the monastery gates. His goats, normally docile little beasts fond of eating whatever's not nailed down, are darting about the hillside, leaping and spinning as if possessed by some very upbeat spirit. You watch fascinated as one goat attempts what can only be described as a cartwheel, and nearly succeeds. A couple of monks have gathered to see the spectacle, and for once there's a ripple of amusement instead of the usual groggy muttering about sore knees and chilly drafts. Kaldi's voice carries over the stone wall. "It's the berries," he insists, holding out a handful of small crimson fruit. "They ate these, and now look." You're skeptical, but you can't deny that something's got these goats acting like they just heard the world's funniest joke. Mainstream history will tell you that Kaldi's discovery is the stuff of legend, a tale that's been passed around like a well-chewed sandal, but never officially written down until centuries later. Still, most agree that the coffee plant Coffea arabica has its wild roots here in the highlands of Ethiopia. The goats, it seems, are the first unwitting caffeine enthusiasts in history. The monks watch as Kaldi's herd sprints, hops, and chases imaginary beetles seemingly immune to fatigue. Of course, not everyone is impressed. Brother Johannes, always ready with a grumble, scoffs. "If only I could bottle that energy for prayers." You can't help but laugh just softly enough that he doesn't hear you. But deep down you're curious. Could these berries really hold the answer to your nightly battle with drowsiness? You wander over to Kaldi, eyeing the berries with cautious interest. They don't look like much red shiny, not particularly juicy. You're reminded of the time you tried to make tea out of pine needles. That was a bad night both for your stomach and for monastery morale. Kaldi assures you the goats love them, but you hesitate. Historians still argue whether Kaldi was a real figure or simply a story invented to explain coffee's miraculous effects you recall from Brother Abel's endless lectures. Some say he was a composite, others that the monks themselves were the true discoverers, having noticed their flocks behaving like medieval acrobats. As you hold a berry up to your nose, you catch a faint grassy scent, nothing special. But curiosity wins out, as it so often does in monasteries where entertainment is scarce, and every night feels twice as long as it should. You pop a berry into your mouth. The taste is, well, let's just say it won't be replacing honey cakes anytime soon. Tart, bitter, a little earthy. You try not to make a face, but your lips purse in protest anyway. One of the younger monks, always eager to outdo everyone, swallows 3 berries at once and immediately regrets it. "Tastes like goat feet," he complains, hopping around in mock agony. You snort, and a ripple of laughter passes through the group. For a moment, the weariness of monastic life melts away. There's mischief in the air, a sense that something important is beginning, even if no one quite understands what yet. Still, you're not ready to declare this a miracle cure for sleeplessness. The goats might love the berries, but you need more than a mouthful of tart fruit to survive another round of midnight prayers. Besides, Brother Johannes insists, if these berries are truly special, the prior will figure it out. You pocket a few for later, feeling a flicker of hope you haven't felt in a long time. As you wander back to your chores, you notice the goats are still at it, bounding, skipping, and looking a lot happier than any monk who's ever had to recite the Psalms at 2 a.m. It's a small thing maybe, but as the sun climbs higher, you can't help but think, what if this is the beginning of something much bigger than a few energetic goats? What if tonight sleep isn't the only thing that escapes you? The day drifts by with the usual blend of chores, prayers, and the ceaseless bleating of Kaldi's excitable goats. But by late afternoon, the story of the dancing herd has already made its way into every corner of the monastery. Monks pause in their work to whisper about the strange berries, and a few even try unsuccessfully to get their own livestock to do a little jig. You catch a novice head bowed over a cluster of wild bushes, muttering, "If only I could borrow a bit of goat energy for the prior's midnight recitations." It doesn't take long for Kaldi's tale to evolve into monastery gossip of the highest order. "Did you hear about the berries that make goats fly?" someone whispers at supper, though no goat has yet left the ground. You roll your eyes, thinking of the way news travels here, slowly at first, then all at once, like honey dribbling from a cracked jar. Even the old cook gets in on the story, claiming he once fed a berry to a chicken, who then laid an egg the size of a melon, which based on monastery chicken records is categorically false. By evening, the prior himself has taken an interest which in monastic terms is as dramatic as a royal summons. Brother Johannes, still clinging to skepticism with the tenacity of a barnacle, scoffs at all the excitement. Perhaps the goats just had a good night's sleep. You're tempted to retort that nobody in this monastery has had a good night's sleep since the last lunar eclipse, but you keep it to yourself. The prior calls a small council beneath the acacia tree, and suddenly you find yourself at the center of the action, clutching a handful of the infamous red berries. Mainstream historical accounts agree that monastic communities often acted as early research and development labs, places where new foods, herbs, and concoctions were studied, tested, and more often than not, quietly discarded. But coffee's journey from wild bush to beloved beverage, that's a tale with more twists than a goat's path down a mountainside. Some scholars argue that it was the monks' own sleeplessness, those long cold vigils, that inspired their curiosity, pushing them to try anything that might keep their eyes open. Others claim the credit should go to local healers or wise women whose remedies often found their way into the monks' routines. You gather with the others, all of you huddled in the dim glow of early evening, and watch as the prior examines the berries. He sniffs them, rubs them between his palms, and finally somewhat heroically nibbles one himself. The verdict: not unpleasant, he proclaims, which is about as close to a rave review as you'll ever get from a man whose culinary standards involve 3-day-old bread and boiled lentils. There's cautious optimism in the air. Maybe these will help us with the night prayers, someone suggests a little too eagerly. Or at least make them more interesting, another monk whispers, and you catch the ghost of a smile on the prior's face. Even Brother Johannes seems momentarily persuaded, though he quickly mutters something about demonic livestock, just for good measure. Historians still argue whether the monks truly understood what they were dealing with at this early stage. Did they sense the bean's potential? Or were they simply bored and looking for a distraction? Some sources suggest it was pure chance, others that it was a deliberate quest for alertness, an age-old battle against sleep. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in the middle. You slip a berry into your own mouth again, feeling its tangy sharpness bite at your tongue. Around you, the monks chatter softly, some daring each other to eat another, others already plotting how they might sneak a few berries into the next evening's meal. The air is heavy with possibility, a sense that for the first time in ages, something genuinely new has arrived in your sleepy, stone-walled world. As darkness falls, you trail back toward the main hall, berry juice staining your fingers. You glance up at the stars scattered like spilled barley across the black velvet of the night sky, and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Will you be more awake? Will the prior allow another taste? And just what kind of dreams do goats have anyway after a midnight snack of magic berries? By the next dusk, the air in the monastery is thick with anticipation, but also a healthy dose of skepticism. The monks are not known for wild experiments, unless you count Brother Abel's infamous attempt to ferment cabbage in a rain barrel, which everyone still pretends never happened. Yet here, you all are clustered near the kitchen, where a small basket of Chaldee's red berries sits like a forbidden treasure. The first to volunteer is unsurprisingly Brother Johannes, driven more by a need to prove everyone wrong than any real curiosity. He pops a berry in his mouth and chews with exaggerated care, his face contorting just enough to amuse the watching novices. Tastes like disappointment, he declares, spitting the seed into the fire. The group laughs, but you sense a flicker of intrigue behind his eyes. You try one yourself, this time more slowly. The skin is firm, the flesh thin and tart, and inside is a hard oblong seed. Not exactly an evening treat. Historians still argue whether these early tasters recognized the potential or were just too polite to spit them out. You recall chuckling to yourself. Some suggest the monks were actively searching for stimulants to fuel their nightly vigils, while others claim it was all an accident, just a matter of desperate curiosity. The night wears on, and soon, a little circle of monks sits cross-legged around the hearth, each of you chewing thoughtfully. The verdict is unanimous. The taste is strange, the texture unremarkable. But there's something else, an odd, subtle feeling that sets in after a few minutes. Not quite a rush, not quite a tingle, just a sense that your thoughts are a little sharper, your eyelids a touch lighter. Or maybe you're just imagining things, hoping for a miracle in the midst of so much routine. One of the younger brothers dares a second handful, then starts reciting the Psalms at a speed usually reserved for dodging angry geese. Laughter echoes off the stone walls, breaking the usual solemn silence of the monastery night. Even the prior is caught smiling, shaking his head as if to say, well, at least they're awake. In the middle of all this, a small crisis unfolds. Someone accidentally drops a cluster of berries onto the hot stones near the hearth. There's a sharp hiss, a brief flash of smoke, and suddenly the room is filled with a scent unlike anything you've ever known. Earthy sweet, a little bit wild, like the promise of rain after a long dry season. You all freeze. A moment later, someone, it might be you, though you'll never admit it, leans closer and inhales. The monks look at one another wide-eyed, realizing this is something entirely new. There are jokes, of course. Brother Johannes insists it smells like burnt bread, but the rest of you know better. There's a collective sense that you've stumbled onto something important, even if you're not quite sure what to do with it yet. Mainstream history agrees the accidental roasting of coffee beans is a key turning point, though no one knows if it was deliberate genius or just clumsy hands. Some say the aroma was so captivating that the monks decided to experiment further, trying every possible way to unlock the power hidden in those stubborn seeds. You spend the rest of the evening debating what to do next. Should you try to grind the beans, boil them, bury them, and hope they turn into something tastier? The night stretches on, filled with possibilities, as you all lean a little closer to the hearth, the smoke and laughter swirling together into something that feels suspiciously like hope. Before you finally shuffle off to bed, you slip another berry into your pocket just in case. Maybe tomorrow will bring another accident or a revelation. For now, you fall asleep to the memory of that strange smoky scent and the promise of a new kind of night. Dawn tiptoes over the hills, painting the monastery walls with pale gold. You shuffle to morning prayers with the smoky memory of last night's accident still clinging to your clothes. The rumor mill has already started. Did you smell it? Like thunder right before it rains. And the monks are more animated than usual, with less yawning and fewer discreet naps behind prayer books. Even Brother Johannes for once manages not to grumble about the draft. After prayers, you and a small group return to the hearth, clutching the handful of scorched berries salvaged from last night. The charred shells crumble in your fingers, revealing seeds inside as hard and dark as little river stones. The kitchen smells faintly of burnt sugar and something else, something promising. A daring novice proposes, why not grind them up and try boiling them? It's either the best idea you've heard all week or a disaster in the making. So begins the first faltering steps toward coffee as a beverage. You wrap the blackened beans in a scrap of linen and smash them with the butt of a wooden ladle. The result is far from uniform. Some bits are powder, some are stubborn chunks. All of it smells vaguely like burnt porridge and excitement. Into a clay pot they go, covered with a ladle full of water from the well. The group gathers around, equal parts hopeful and horrified. Mainstream historians widely agree that this earliest coffee brew was no gourmet affair. Bitter, cloudy, more interesting than delicious. You all watch the pot steam curling upward, carrying that peculiar roasted aroma. Someone cracks a joke about inventing a new kind of soup, and laughter bounces off the walls. You pour the dark bracing liquid into small clay cups, one for each brave soul. There's a sense of ceremony to it, as if you're taking part in something quietly monumental. The first sip is a shock to the system. The taste is bold, almost aggressive, burnt, earthy, a little sour, and not remotely sweet. It's like licking a charred sandal, one monk mutters, only half joking. Still, there's something about it that makes you take a second sip and a third. You notice your mind sharpening, your fatigue receding just a bit, as if the world has been nudged into slightly clearer focus. It isn't magic, but it's the closest thing you've felt in weeks. There's plenty of debate among modern scholars about these first brews. Some argue the earliest coffee was actually chewed, not sipped or mixed with ghee or animal fat for sustenance. Others believe the monks were already experimenting with simple infusions, anything to ward off sleep. What no one disputes is that those first cups must have tasted nothing like today's cappuccino. A fringe detail emerges as one novice who apparently never learned moderation drinks an entire cup in 3 gulps and begins reciting his genealogy back to Adam, pausing only to hiccup. The monks collapse in laughter, their fatigue replaced with jittery amusement. For a monastery, this is practically a party. Someone suggests adding honey or herbs to the next batch, but for now, you simply marvel at the fact that you are for once more awake than tired. Historians still argue whether this awakening was immediate or gradual, whether the monks instantly recognized coffee's power, or if they simply stumbled onward, hoping for a miracle that tasted less like roasted regret. Either way, tonight's prayers are going to be very different. As the day drifts on, the monks pass around the pot for another experimental sip, sharing jokes and a rare sense of anticipation. For the first time in living memory, everyone is looking forward to staying up late. Night settles over the monastery, but instead of the usual sleepy haze, there's a nervous energy pulsing through the corridors. The pot of coffee, if you can call it that, has found its way back to the kitchen hearth, where it's kept warm by the fire and closely guarded by Brother Johannes, who has quietly transformed into a gatekeeper of the new brew. You gather with the others, eager to see if last night's bitter miracle was a one-time fluke or the start of something more. Prayers come and go, but for once hardly anyone is nodding off. You're wide awake, feeling a strange alertness in your bones. Your thoughts race maybe a little too quickly through the Psalms and Scriptures. By the second hour, you start to notice the subtle signs: monks glancing at each other with raised eyebrows, the sound of feet tapping in time with the chanting, a little more laughter echoing through the chilly corridors. Even the prior seems lighter, cracking a joke about divine inspiration in a clay cup that draws genuine chuckles from the ranks. Mainstream history confirms that religious rituals often relied on stimulants, incense, fasting, even chilly mountain air, to keep worshippers sharp. But here tonight, coffee is the star. Some monks embrace the new drink as a blessing, crediting it with helping them focus on prayer and copy manuscripts late into the night. Others worry that the newfound energy might be a sign of trouble, a temptation sent to test their devotion. Brother Johannes, of course, still has his doubts. "We'll see if you're all so cheerful at dawn," he mutters, but he doesn't turn down a second cup. You find yourself strangely grateful for his grumpiness. It's comforting, like the rough wool of your robe or the scratch of straw under your mat. There's a feeling that you're all participating in something historic, even if it's just for the sake of staying awake through another endless vigil. You watch as one of the younger monks, after his third sip, begins to rearrange prayer scrolls by height, then by color, then alphabetically, before launching into a debate about whether goats or sheep are holier. This sparks a round of sleepy laughter, and soon even the prior is telling a story about the time he mistook a goat for a visiting bishop. Both had the same beard, but the goat was a better listener. Somewhere in the midst of this caffeine-fueled camaraderie, you catch yourself wondering, is this what divine inspiration feels like? Or just a well-timed burst of alertness? Historians still argue whether the monks saw coffee as a holy aid or a dangerous distraction, and you sense that tonight's experience will feed those debates for generations to come. As midnight draws near, you sip another cup, savoring the warmth and the earthy taste. You're alert, your thoughts are clear, and for once, you're actually looking forward to the next round of prayers. The world outside is silent, the sky glittering with stars, and inside the monastery walls, you and your brothers are united by a new ritual, a little bitter, a little strange, but suddenly essential. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensation linger. You can almost imagine a future where every sleepless soul finds comfort in a cup, and every cold night is made a little brighter by the simple act of sharing something new. For now, though, you're just grateful to be awake alive, and perhaps for the first time, a tiny bit excited for the long sleepless night ahead. Sometime around the third or fourth prayer of the night, as you kneel with aching knees on your straw mat, you notice the monastery's usual struggle against fatigue has turned into something almost lively. There's a glimmer of mischief in the air, and even the most humorless elders appear less stone-faced, their brows less furrowed. The new brew, still bitter, still mysterious, has worked its way into the rhythm of your night. Each time the cup passes, a little more tension seems to melt from your bones, replaced by the gentle thrum of wide-awake curiosity. You're not alone in feeling this change. The prior looks at his flock with new appreciation, seeing the old arguments about drowsiness during nocturnal prayers evaporate. Instead of slumped monks and half-mumbled verses, you all stand a little straighter, voices rising and falling with rare confidence. For a fleeting moment, it almost feels like you're part of something secret and revolutionary, a caffeine-fueled brotherhood bound together by sleeplessness and smoky flavors. But of course, this is a monastery, and miracles are met with both wonder and suspicion. Historians still argue whether the monks regarded coffee as a true gift or as a clever cheat. You remember the prior saying with a raised eyebrow. Was it a divine answer to nightly prayer fatigue, or just a mischievous shortcut that sidestepped the honest suffering of spiritual discipline? Some records hint at debates stretching well into the morning hours, pitting those eager to embrace the magic of the beans against others who saw danger in anything that made holy work too easy. There's also a touch of rivalry. A rumor starts, likely thanks to Brother Abel, that whoever drinks the most coffee will see visions by dawn. The novices, ever gullible, begin sneaking extra sips whenever they think no one's looking. The results are equal parts hilarious and alarming. One monk attempts to recite 3 psalms at once. Another insists he can hear the goats whispering spiritual advice. And someone else starts composing a hymn to the blessed bean of alertness, which by all accounts is terrible poetry. Despite the gentle chaos, you find yourself marveling at how quickly the new routine takes hold. There's a sense that the night, which once dragged on like a punishment, has transformed into a time of possibility. Even the stars outside seem to twinkle more brightly, as if celebrating the change. And yet, there's an undercurrent of anxiety. How long before the prior cracks down? How long before someone ruins it for everyone by mixing the wrong herb into the brew, or falling asleep face down in their cup? Mainstream historical fact. It's true that coffee's spread through religious communities was not without controversy. Some monasteries eventually banned it, fearing its effects on prayer and discipline, while others, especially those known for long, intricate rituals, embraced it with gusto. The records are incomplete, the truth somewhere between legend and daily survival. One curious detail seldom discussed in history books: an old monk rumored to be part magician begins blessing the coffee pot before each brewing session, insisting it will ward off goatish mischief. Whether he's serious or not is anyone's guess, but you have to admit, the coffee does seem to taste a little sweeter afterward. As dawn hints at the horizon, you're left wide-eyed but strangely content, caught somewhere between laughter, reverence, and a suspicion that you've witnessed the start of something that will ripple far beyond these stone walls. The long night is nearly over, but your story has only just begun. The next evening arrives with a sense of eager anticipation, a rarity in a place where excitement usually means an extra fig at supper. The prior, sensing the growing obsession with the bitter brew, calls for a formal trial, an experiment he insists for the good of our souls and our sanity. You and your fellow monks assemble in the common hall, the air filled with a curious mix of reverence and rebellion. Someone has taken it upon themselves to polish the clay cups, as if preparing for a sacred rite, rather than another round of midnight survival tactics. With a flourish worthy of a festival, the novice ladles out small servings of coffee for each monk. The aroma, smoky, earthy, inviting, now seems to signal the start of something official, almost ritualistic. This time you're ready for the taste, bracing, strong, still not quite pleasant, but strangely compelling. The cup warms your hands, and soon your thoughts. It's impossible not to grin at the way everyone tries to hide their excitement, pretending this is all in the name of discipline. Mainstream historians point out that religious communities around the world have often used plants and brews to aid meditation or prayer. Coffee, it seems, is joining the ranks of incense and holy water as a tool for spiritual focus. Yet as you watch Brother Abel drain his cup and launch into a philosophical debate about whether coffee is truly holy, or just a blessed loophole, you realize not everyone is on board. Some monks argue that using coffee to stay awake for prayers feels a little like cheating at a game you were never meant to win. A quirky tidbit emerges when the kitchen's resident prankster decides to drop a pinch of dried mint into the communal pot. The result, a flavor that's both invigorating and frankly somewhat terrifying. Laughter erupts as monks try to guess what's lurking in their cups. Some say it's the taste of fresh grass. Others suspect Brother Johannes finally lost his mind and started brewing his socks. You joke that with enough experimentation, you'll either unlock a miracle or invent something that gets you all exiled to the goat shed. Historians still argue whether the monks at your monastery were the first to turn coffee into a regular ritual, or if they borrowed the idea from neighboring villages or wandering mystics. The truth, of course, is as murky as a badly brewed cup. Some say the monks were trailblazers. Others claim the credit belongs to Sufi pilgrims who carried the practice across Africa and beyond. The ritual takes shape quickly. Coffee is served at the start of evening prayers, then again before the midnight round. The effect is immediate and dramatic. No more dozing during chants, no more sleepwalking through scripture. Instead, you find your mind clear, your spirit a little lighter, and the long hours of darkness not quite so intimidating. Some brothers, emboldened by this newfound alertness, even volunteer for extra reading shifts, claiming they feel as if the angels themselves have brewed the beans. Still, not everyone is convinced. A few older monks grumble about newfangled distractions and warn that the prior's patience won't last forever. But as you sip your cup, feeling the warmth seep into your bones, you can't help but think, this is more than a trend. This is the birth of a ritual, a shared secret that turns even the bleakest night into something almost worth staying awake for. As the weeks pass, coffee becomes the monastery's not-so-secret obsession, fueling both ritual and rumor. With each new batch, the stories grow taller. Goats that compose poetry, monks who can recite every psalm backward, a novice who claims he saw the Virgin Mary in a swirl of steam, though as you recall, he's also prone to fainting at the sight of spiders. It's hard to say where fact ends and mischief begins, but it's clear that the brew has taken on a life of its own. The monks begin inventing wild explanations for coffee's effects. Some insist it's a test from above, a divine challenge meant to sharpen the mind and expose the lazy. Others joke that the beans are possessed by spirits, the same ones that keep the goats up all night. The more skeptical brothers, led as ever by Brother Johannes, mutter that it's all nonsense. If this is divine intervention, why does it taste like burnt soup? He grumbles, sipping nonetheless. Despite the playful debate, coffee's role in daily life is impossible to ignore. Morning chores get done faster. The scriptorium is filled with more diligent scribbling and less drooping of heads. You even notice the cook smiling more often, though. Whether it's due to coffee or the fact that the kitchen is now a social hub, you can't be sure. Mainstream historical accounts confirm that as coffee's popularity spread, so too did the myths. In many regions, tales of magical beans, enchanted animals, and even forbidden love swirl around the origins of the drink. Ethiopian oral tradition, never short on imagination, is peppered with legends of talking goats and monks who could stay awake for 7 days straight. You laugh as you remember the story of Brother Tades, who supposedly once beat the village rooster at its own game, crowing at dawn after a sleepless night. Of course, not every experiment is a success. The monks try mixing the beans with everything from honey to wild ginger root to mashed lentils. That last one is never spoken of again. Each batch produces a fresh round of gossip and the occasional minor disaster, like the time Brother Abel added a dash of sour goat's milk, resulting in a potion so vile that even the most adventurous novices feigned sudden illnesses. Historians still argue whether these playful legends helped or hindered coffee's acceptance in religious circles. Was the humor a way of diffusing suspicion, or did it give ammunition to those who believed the drink was unnatural, even heretical? There's no consensus. Of course, just as there's no agreement on whether your own sleeplessness is due to spiritual devotion or too many late-night cups. And yet amid all the tall tales and failed concoctions, something remarkable is happening. The monks are drawing closer, united by the shared experience of discovery and the thrill of experimenting with the unknown. Even Brother Johannes has mellowed, trading his gripes for sly jokes and the occasional wry smile. It's as if the beans in their mysterious bitterness have sweetened the bonds between you all. One night as you gather by the hearth, a novice asks, "What if the rest of the world never finds out?" You chuckle and sip, feeling the warmth seep through your fingers. "Let's hope they don't," you whisper back, "or else we'll have to start locking the doors at prayer time." With coffee firmly ensconced in your nightly routine, the monks' experiments grow bolder and occasionally a little reckless. The pursuit of the perfect cup has become an unofficial competition, sparking as much rivalry as camaraderie. You recall with a wince the night someone tried roasting beans over an open flame while reading aloud from the Psalms, resulting in scorched robes, a minor fire alarm, monastery-style frantic bucket passing, and a smoky aroma that lingered in the dormitory for a week. Still, most attempts are less dramatic. You and a few others try to refine your technique, grinding beans between stones for a finer texture, tinkering with water temperatures, and testing every conceivable vessel from chipped clay pots to a copper kettle borrowed from the kitchen after much negotiation and one lost sweet bun. Mainstream history tells us that these early experiments with roasting and brewing were mostly trial and error, sometimes more error than triumph. But each botched batch brought you closer to something resembling pleasure, rather than penance. Historians still argue whether the monks ever developed anything like modern coffee in these first generations. Some point to manuscripts from later centuries describing smooth aromatic brews, while others insist it was all a primitive, gritty ordeal, more like drinking burnt broth than sipping a warm hug. What's clear is that the monks, resourceful and stubborn as they are, refuse to settle for mediocrity. Every ruined cup is a lesson, every burnt bean a badge of honor. A quirky fact emerges in the kitchen one evening when a monk, distracted by the scent of roasting beans, forgets about his honey cake in the oven. The resulting coffee cake is not exactly a culinary masterpiece, but it sets off a wave of dessert-themed experiments, some of which are edible, most of which are legendary for other reasons. Brother Abel starts keeping a secret recipe scroll of successes and disasters, the entries ranging from heavenly honey drizzle to burnt lentil loaf, never again. Through all the trial and error, the air in the monastery is charged with excitement. Even the prior, who once considered coffee an oddity, now makes discreet inquiries about when the next batch will be ready. You begin to notice small but important changes: monks volunteering for late-night duties, arguments over who gets the first cup, and a steady stream of visitors curious about the miracle drink. The ritual of roasting has its own rhythm now. Someone sorts the beans, someone else tends the fire, and you, proud keeper of the grindstone, prepare the grounds with exaggerated seriousness. There's joking, of course, but also pride in the process. The youngest novices take turns fanning the flames, each hoping for a whiff of that intoxicating aroma, while the oldest monks lean close to the hearth, offering unsolicited advice and stories from their own wild youths, most of which involve goat's rain and dubious herbal teas. As the latest batch is poured, you savor the anticipation almost as much as the taste itself. The first sip is still strong, still odd, but a little smoother than before. You raise your cup to the others and offer a toast to accidental genius and persistent monks. Laughter and applause fill the kitchen, And for a moment, you forget the chill outside the stiff mats, the endless repetition of daily life. You may not have invented perfection, but you've brewed something rare, a new sense of community built on shared mishaps, midnight experiments, and the belief that even the humblest berry can transform the world one sleepless night at a time. Days become weeks, and the quest for the perfect cup shows no sign of slowing. The monks, emboldened by a few near successes, and more than a few disasters, begin to experiment with all sorts of additives. Honey for sweetness, crushed cardamom pods, wild cinnamon bark, and even a sprig or two of mountain thyme. You join in with enthusiasm, though not every combination is a hit. The spiced goat milk blend quickly becomes the punchline of the season, with Brother Johannes warning, "Next time just add a shoe and call it supper." A curious camaraderie forms as you gather around the fire each evening, debating which cup tastes closest to perfection. The kitchen echoes with laughter, the kind that makes the stone walls feel warmer, even when the night winds rattle the shutters. Someone finds an old clay jar perfect for mixing, and the novice in charge of stirring develops a talent for not spilling, though the same can't be said for the jokes he tells. Mainstream history records that it was in monasteries like yours that coffee's flavor evolved, shaped as much by boredom and accident as by deliberate genius. Each attempt brings new insights, sometimes from the most unexpected sources. One night, a passing traveler from the lowlands shares a tip: "Steep, don't boil." You all eye him suspiciously at first, but the resulting brew is noticeably less bitter, and the traveler earns an invitation to supper, along with a request to teach his method twice more, just to be sure. Historians still argue whether the true Ethiopian coffee ritual started in the monasteries or among village families who had their own quieter traditions. Some say the monks simply borrowed what was already being done in the hills and valleys, dressing it up in sacred routine. Others believe the elaborate ceremony, the slow roasting, the wafting aroma, the 3 rounds of pouring began right here amid your sleepless ranks. There are fierce debates too about how coffee should be served. Some monks swear by adding honey for sweetness, while others insist the pure earthy bitterness is part of the experience. A few adventurous souls toss in a pinch of dried orange peel, or a splash of goat's milk, to reactions ranging from delighted applause to melodramatic gagging. Your own preference changes nightly depending on your mood, the weather, or which joke lands best by the fire. A favorite fringe detail emerges during one particularly experimental evening. Brother Abel, never one for moderation, combines every available additive in a single cup. The resulting concoction is politely dubbed Abel's elixir. Its effects are legendary. Some say it caused him to finish his chores for the week in one night, while others claim he merely hallucinated an army of dancing goats. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in between. Yet amid all the debate and laughter, there is a sense of progress. Each evening's council feels less like survival, and more like a gathering of friends, searching not only for the perfect drink, but for a reason to savor the darkness together. You begin to realize that coffee's magic isn't just in its ability to chase away sleep. It's in the way it draws people close, giving them something to argue, joke, and dream about. And so the nights pass, filled with new flavors, endless stories, and the growing certainty that even if you never agree on the best cup, you'll always have another excuse to try. The changes brought by coffee ripple beyond the kitchen and into every corner of monastic life. You notice it first in the scriptorium, where monks once struggled to keep their eyes open as they copied ancient texts by flickering candlelight. Now there's a fresh vigor in the air. The scratch of quills is sharper, the chants less sluggish. You even catch the prior humming as he checks the work, though he'll deny it if asked. Pages that once took days are completed in hours, and the monastery's library grows at a pace no one's ever seen before. Mainstream history records the Ethiopian monasteries as early centers of learning, where ancient scrolls were treasured and painstakingly preserved. Some scholars credit coffee with transforming the monks' nightly labor, turning their isolated scriptoriums into unlikely beacons of productivity. Still, not everyone agrees on the extent. Historians still argue whether the fabled coffee-fueled manuscript boom was real or exaggerated in later retellings, perhaps by monks eager to justify their new nightly ritual. Yet the impact is hard to ignore. You and your fellow scribes notice your minds wandering less, your eyes less tempted to drift shut. There's talk of organizing all the old records, finally deciphering that mysterious text about rain cycles, maybe even composing new hymns. Of course there are hiccups. Brother Johannes, ever the skeptic, claims he caught a junior monk copying the same line 3 times in a row, proof he says that coffee makes you faster, not smarter. You can't help but laugh and wonder if future readers will notice the accidental loop tucked between more eloquent verses. A quirky tradition develops. Each completed scroll earns its scribe a cup of coffee, the reward for survival, as Brother Abel calls it. The novices soon start vying to finish their assigned passages, and the kitchen finds itself brewing more pots than ever before. Soon even the elders join the fun, recalling the days before coffee, when finished work was rewarded only with the chance to sweep the dormitory. Progress, you say with a wink, tastes a lot better these days. Not everything goes smoothly. The increased activity brings growing pains, a few ink spills, a heated argument about whether coffee stains count as historically significant marks, and at least one disastrous incident involving an overturned candle, a stack of wet parchment, and a mad scramble for sand buckets. Still, the mood remains lighter, the setbacks framed as more fuel for tomorrow's jokes. Historians, forever the skeptics, still debate how much of this is real progress, and how much is just good storytelling. Some point out that productivity always ebbs and flows, that one lucky harvest or a break in the weather could do as much as 100 cups of coffee. Others counter that the monks' records themselves, fewer mistakes, neater lines, the occasional doodle in the margins, hint at a deeper, more lasting change. You're not sure which side is right. All you know is that your little world feels brighter, busier, and a lot more fun than before. Every evening, as the scriptorium fills with laughter, clinking cups, and the quiet satisfaction of another page complete, you're reminded that sometimes it's the smallest discoveries that leave the biggest marks. Word of your little brown miracle doesn't stay confined to the monastery walls for long. At first it spreads in whispers between traveling monks, visiting pilgrims, and curious merchants delivering goods to the outer gate. A goat herder from the neighboring valley mentions to a trader that the monks drink something that keeps them up all night and makes them sing like birds at dawn. The trader laughs, of course, but asks for a sample anyway. Within a week, people from nearby villages begin appearing with more frequency, bringing offerings of barley fruit and stories in exchange for a tiny sip of the strange brew. You and the others watch this unfold with bemusement, like spectators at a very slow-moving festival. Suddenly, your quiet, sleepy monastery has become a point of interest, and it's all thanks to some formerly neglected red berries and a few sleepless nights. Mainstream historical records hint at this slow burn, how coffee's early reputation traveled not through grand declarations, but through conversations and hospitality. One farmer, one mystic, one caravan at a time. No printing press, no royal edicts, just monks with bags under their eyes and steaming cups in their hands, quietly changing the world. Of course there's some debate. Historians still argue whether coffee's spread started with monastics or rural farmers who noticed their goats acting up. You recall sipping your own cup while watching 2 shepherds trade stories near the monastery gate. The truth, as usual, is probably a little of both. But it's clear that the drink once kept for sleepy monks is now taking on a second life out there, beyond your stone walls, in hands far more callous than your own. You witness the change in real time. A visitor from a lowland monastery tries your latest batch, then insists on taking a bundle of roasted beans and instructions home. He departs the next morning with an extra cup tucked into his satchel and a half-baked plan to plant a roasting hut of his own. Another visitor, a Sufi traveler from across the Rift Valley, sits in silent joy after 1 cup, then chants softly for over an hour beneath the acacia tree. Later, he leaves a carved wooden bead on the coffee pot as thanks. A fringe moment comes when 2 monks argue heatedly over whether allowing outsiders to drink the brew Is wise stewardship or reckless generosity? The debate ends, as most things do here, with a shared cup and a sarcastic toast to our ever-widening circle of caffeinated heretics. The prior, too, has started to shift. Once wary of outside attention, he now meets guests with something bordering on pride. You catch him offering a sip to a visiting deacon with a smile that could almost be called smug. It helps with the psalms, he says, and the digestion. You suppress a chuckle. The coffee, it seems, has not only made you more awake, it's made you more generous, more curious, and perhaps a little more daring. There's a new sense of possibility, of ideas flowing in and out, like the scent of roasting beans on the breeze. You start to wonder if a handful of monks and a few energetic goats can change the rhythm of one monastery. What happens when the whole world starts brewing? It begins with a whisper and a worn leather sandal. A Sufi mystic named Idris arrives at your monastery just before dusk, his robe dust-streaked from weeks of walking. He speaks gently in phrases that feel like poetry and carries nothing but a wooden staff, a satchel of manuscripts, and more curiously, a tiny pouch of dried berries, nearly identical to your own coffee beans. He accepts a cup of your latest brew with both hands, inhales deeply, then closes his eyes in what can only be described as reverence. After the first sip, he chuckles softly. "Ah," he says, "so you've met the dancing goats too." The monks are instantly fascinated. You sit with him beneath the acacia tree, watching the stars blink awake. He speaks of long nights of Dhikr Sufi chants carried on breath and rhythm, and the desperate need to stay alert through the hours of darkness. The mind wanders when the body is tired, he says. But with this, the spirit soars. Mainstream historical records support the idea that coffee spread significantly through Sufi communities in East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Many Sufi orders used it during all-night recitations and meditative trances, finding in its bitterness a partner to spiritual sweetness. While historians still argue whether it was the monks or the Sufis who truly pioneered its ritual use, moments like this make the question seem beside the point. Clearly, the connection was inevitable. Brother Johannes, as always, remains skeptical. "Are we now hosting traveling bards with questionable footwear?" he mutters after inspecting Idris's sandals. But even he can't deny the calm, luminous energy the visitor brings. For 3 nights, Idris stays with you, chanting after prayers, sharing stories of distant hills and caravan trails of mountain winds, and city walls where coffee is already beginning to make its mark. A fringe story he tells catches your attention. In a far-off coastal town, a spice merchant boiled the beans with cloves and salt, then gave it to sailors before long voyages. They said it kept the seasickness away. Idris grins. Or maybe they were just too wired to notice the waves. The monks, inspired, begin discussing coffee as more than just a beverage. Could it be a tool for focus? A symbol of divine attention? A gift meant to be shared, not hoarded? The prior, after listening quietly, suggests adding a formal coffee gathering before evening prayers, just a simple moment of gratitude and warmth to draw the brothers together. That night, the first circle of the cup is held in the courtyard, under a sky soft with stars and the faint hiss of boiling water. Cups are passed, poems are recited. Even Brother Abel reads a short verse he claims was composed entirely under the influence of 6 beans and divine panic. You can't remember the last time the monastery felt so alive after sunset. Historians might look back and see a movement taking root, 1 cup, 1 chant, 1 story at a time. But to you, it's simpler than that. You watch as Idris lifts his cup once more and murmurs a prayer, not loud, not grand, but full of something ancient and bright. And you begin to suspect that the world beyond the monastery will not stay quiet for long. The morning after Idris departs, the courtyard feels quieter, but not empty. Something lingers in the air, like the last chord of a hymn. You sit by the fire, sipping your cup slowly, letting the warmth travel through you, still replaying his stories in your mind. He left behind a folded scrap of parchment, a prayer in flowing Arabic script, and a half-filled pouch of beans wrapped in soft cloth. A quiet gift, the kind you don't speak of, but treasure all the same. It isn't long before others begin to arrive. Not in great numbers, not yet, but enough to turn heads. A trader from the Rift Valley appears with questions about the monk's drink, offering jars of honey in trade. A visiting cleric from the highlands stays up all night copying passages by lamplight, crediting the sacred bitterness for his clarity. You and the others watch a little stunned as your once sleepy monastery becomes something of a coffee destination. Mainstream history notes that monasteries often acted as both spiritual centers and local trade hubs, and yours is quickly learning to juggle both. One monk is appointed bean steward, responsible for measuring out the roasted seeds and ensuring no one hoards them under their mattress. A necessary precaution. Brother Abel was caught stashing a small jar in his laundry. Coffee, once a strange little indulgence, is becoming part of your economy. You begin trading roasted beans with neighboring villagers in exchange for eggs, barley, goat's milk, and occasionally stories. One woman offers a carved bone spoon in exchange for 2 cups. Another trades a bolt of indigo-dyed cloth after her elderly father declares the drink more reviving than prayer, which causes a scandal until he clarifies that he meant it after bad prayer. Historians still argue whether monks were the first to commercialize coffee, or if the villagers beat them to it. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle. You're not selling coffee, not yet, but the lines are blurring. A pot brewed for prayer becomes a pot shared for kindness, then a pot exchanged for favors. No coins pass hands, but value certainly does. A quirky moment comes when the monastery cat, an aloof creature who has never once acknowledged your existence, begins curling up beside the roasting fire every evening. Some claim she's drawn to the warmth. Others insist she's after the beans. A novice swears she once swatted a clump of roasted coffee onto his sleeping mat, a sign he believes that even the animals understand its power. The cat, as always, declines to comment. The prior begins organizing official roasting days, assigning rotations, and introducing something he calls the sacred spoon, a carved utensil used only to stir the beans kept locked in the chapel when not in use. Brother Johannes predictably calls this absurd. Next, we'll be giving it a name and holding feasts in its honor. You're only half joking when you reply, "Let's name it St. Percolus." Evenings now begin with the hiss of water and the scent of roast, followed by soft conversation and that gentle moment of communal pause before the first sip. It's more than habit, it's ceremony. The monks gather not out of obligation, but because something about the ritual binds you, comforts you, invites you to stay awake just a little longer. You've begun to wonder if this was always the purpose of the drink. Not just to stave off sleep, but to open space in the dark hours, for togetherness, for reflection, for wonder. The world outside may not know yet, but you do. The bean is more than a stimulant. It's a symbol, a bond. And tonight, as you roast the next batch, the courtyard filling once again with smoke and laughter, you sense that bond, tightening cup by cup. It was only a matter of time before someone outside the monastery asked the dangerous question, what if this brew isn't holy at all? The man who utters it is a priest from a distant hilltop shrine, visiting for a week of shared prayer and cool mountain air. He watches the monks sip their evening cups with a slight curl of his lip arms, folded tightly in judgment. Stimulants, he says, can awaken more than the mind. Appetite, ego, even temptation. The courtyard falls quiet. For a moment it feels like the coals in the roasting fire have gone cold. The prior, surprisingly calm, replies only, "Perhaps." But so can the Psalms. Mainstream history shows us that coffee faced religious scrutiny almost from its first sips. Some leaders called it a drink of the devil, claiming that anything which unnaturally delayed sleep must surely interfere with divine order. Others feared that too much wakefulness would tempt the soul into mischief. Historians still argue whether the earliest bans were driven by spiritual concern or simply fear of change brewing in quiet corners. You feel the tension hang thick in the air. For days, no new beans are roasted. The monastery falls back into old rhythms, stiff and heavy with silence. Night prayers drag on, sluggish and yawning. Scrolls take longer to copy. Conversations taper off into polite murmurs. Even the cat seems offended, stalking past the fire pit with an exaggerated huff. But under the surface, you all know the pot is still there. The beans still wait in their sacks. No one has dared to destroy them. Even Brother Johannes, whose loyalty to tradition rivals the sun's to morning, looks particularly grumpy by mid-vigil. You suspect he misses the warmth in his hands as much as the sharpness in his thoughts. Then one evening, the wind shifts. A small group gathers quietly in the kitchen. No formal roasting, no toasts, just a modest pot, a handful of beans, and a few cups passed without ceremony. The priest notices. He says nothing, but on the third night you spot him sipping from a cup left accidentally near the hearth. He grimaces at the bitterness, says nothing, and returns to prayer. But he sleeps less deeply after that. A fringe tale surfaces from a novice supposedly in a distant land. Monks who drank too much coffee were cursed with dreams so vivid they could write entire scriptures from memory. The tale is absurd, of course, but it catches fire. Suddenly, drinking coffee becomes an act of playful rebellion. Cups are passed with winks, beans traded like contraband. Even the prior stops pretending to look surprised. Historians often overlook these quiet revolutions, the little acts of defiance that happen not with fire and shouting, but with sips and shared glances. You realize that coffee's resilience isn't just about its effects. It's about how it brings people together even under suspicion, especially under suspicion. By week's end, the visiting priest requests a small sack of beans for theological analysis. You all nod solemnly, agreeing this sounds very proper. No one mentions the second sack he tucks away in his robes. The monastery exhales. The roast returns. The spoons clink again. And you, nestled in the glow of the fire, feel something settle in your chest, not just warmth, but conviction. Coffee may yet stir doubt in hearts beyond these hills. But here, among the monks who first tasted its magic and chose to keep sipping it, has already found something close to sanctuary. Once the doubts subside and the visiting priest rides off with two suspiciously bulging satchels, the monastery plunges headfirst back into innovation. It's as if that brief pause only sharpened your collective obsession. Now, every monk fancies himself a connoisseur. Cups are swirled. Brews are compared. Phrases like notes of burnt clay and undertones of goat become strangely common. This enthusiasm leads to the inevitable additives. Again. One morning, Brother Abel appears with a wild grin and an armful of herbs, roots, and things that probably shouldn't be called food. "We haven't tried salt yet," he says far too cheerfully. "It's what the caravan folk use. Keeps the body strong." The prior sighs but lets him proceed, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of sheer amusement. The resulting brew is unforgettable, sharp, briny, reminiscent of seawater left too long in the sun. You sip politely and manage not to gag, but Brother Johannes spits his into a flower pot with such theatrical disgust that you consider applauding. Mainstream accounts suggest that early coffee drinkers experimented wildly with preparation methods, boiling with butter, mixing with animal fat, or drinking it unfiltered, ground and all. Some scholars suggest that this was less about flavor and more about survival, people trying to extract every ounce of strength from whatever ingredients they had. Historians still argue whether these strange combinations were nutritional, medicinal, or simply the desperate inventions of men with too much time and too few snacks. Here it's a bit of all three. Your kitchen becomes a laboratory. Spiced lentils steeped with beans, bad. Coffee boiled with fig leaves, surprisingly good. A double roast technique that produces a smoother cup but threatens to destroy the clay pot in the process. Mixed results. Someone even tries brewing beans in snowmelt water. It tastes cold and hopeful like the first day of spring. A quirky moment arises when a young novice adds a wildflower to his cup and swears it made him hear colors. For the next week, monks joke about floral notes every time someone forgets their lines during prayer. You laugh until your stomach aches. Evenings grow louder, livelier, less solemn in the best possible way. You find yourselves lingering after the last chant, sipping slowly, telling stories that meander into jokes and small confessions. Once Brother Johannes admits just once that he no longer minds the taste. Still terrible, he insists. But less terrible than silence. Some of the elders fret over this shift. Too much joy, one whispers. Not enough reverence. But even he doesn't turn down his evening cup. Historians often focus on how coffee moved across trade routes, Ethiopia to Yemen, Yemen to Cairo, but rarely on what it did to tiny communities like yours. They miss the laughter, the little debates, the burnt pots, and the way one stubborn plant slowly made brothers out of men who once barely spoke. One night you take your cup and sit alone under the stars, listening to the wind slip through the juniper trees. You think of the first time you saw the goats dancing, the disbelief on your brothers' faces, the skeptical smirks, the cautious first sips. You think of how far you've come from tart berries and trial roasts to something richer, something that's more than just a drink. It's culture now, ritual, memory in liquid form. And as the night deepens and the last coals cool in the hearth, you wonder if the rest of the world could taste what you've built here. Would they even believe it started with a goat? The stars above your monastery feel closer tonight, like silver lanterns hung just low enough to touch. You sit at the edge of the courtyard, warm cup in hand, watching the fire's glow flicker over familiar faces. Monks who once groaned at midnight prayers now linger by the hearth, arguing over the optimal roasting time, like theologians debating the afterlife. You take a sip. This batch has a touch of ginger, and breathe in the quiet joy of a community transformed. Still beneath the laughter and learning, an old question lingers: who really discovered coffee? Brother Abel, ever the romantic, swears it was Caldi, and his acrobatic goats divinely inspired, of course. Brother Johannes rolls his eyes so hard it's audible and insists that legend is nothing but bedtime fodder for sleepy novices. Historians still argue whether Caldi even existed. He growls. More likely some hungry herder chewed a berry and had a panic attack. Others argue that the monks themselves were the true pioneers, that your sleepless nights, the endless tinkering with heat and flavor, this was the beginning of coffee as we know it. Some even claim that the monastery's precise location gives it an automatic claim to the title of first ever coffee brewers, which sparks a surprisingly intense discussion about geography and divine favoritism. Still, others like you think the truth is a beautiful mess of all these things: goats, monks, wanderers, and accident. That perhaps no one invented coffee at all. It simply revealed itself little by little to those tired enough to notice. A fringe story emerges from the scroll room one rainy afternoon. A visiting scribe from the Red Sea coast shares a curious manuscript fragment, faded, water-damaged, written in Ge'ez. It references a bitter potion consumed in darkness by the faithful, which brings fire to the mind and dust to sleep. Could it be an early mention of your beloved brew? Or just another monastic remedy lost to time? The scholars argue for days. The novice tasked with recopying the text secretly doodles a goat in the margins. Outside, the weather shifts. The rainy season has begun, and the monastery takes on a softer rhythm. Wet leaves stick to the stone paths. Rain drums on the clay roof tiles. You find that coffee tastes even better on cold mornings, its warmth curling through you like a prayer in liquid form. The prior begins each day now with a quiet roast. No words, just the hiss of flame and the gentle swirl of beans in the pan. Villagers continue to visit, not just for sips, but for stories. You find yourself telling the tale of the first roasted beans so often you start to wonder which parts are real and which you've embellished over time. But no one seems to mind. They sip, they smile, they nod, as if they were there that night. The berries fell onto the coals, and perhaps in a way, they were. Because coffee, you've come to realize, isn't a product, it's a story. A long, winding one with goats and prayers, fire and friendship, bitterness and warmth. It lives in memory, in ritual, in the strange way your hands now know how to roast beans without thinking. Whether or not history ever gives your little monastery credit, it doesn't matter anymore. You've seen how something so small, so humble can change everything. One cup. One night. One chance to stay awake. By now, coffee has outgrown its role as mere brew. It's become the heartbeat of your evenings, the soft hum beneath every conversation, every shared story, every silent moment under the stars. And with its spread comes something new and unexpected: community. What began as a sleepy line of monks passing around burnt-tasting water has turned into a full-blown nightly gathering. You've begun inviting neighbors, farmers, shepherds, woodworkers, women from the nearby village with wind-chapped hands and bright laughter. They arrive at dusk with woven baskets, wool cloaks, and curiosity in their eyes. No formal invitation is needed. The aroma alone is enough to draw them in. The courtyard transforms each evening into something warm and flickering. Lanterns sway from hooks, their light dancing on clay walls. The fire crackles, roasting pans spin, and a dozen conversations unfold at once. Stories are shared. Goats are blamed for everything, rightfully or not, and the cups make their quiet rounds. Everyone leans forward when the first sip is taken. Too strong, someone asks. Just strong enough, comes the inevitable reply. Mainstream history often skips over the village-level impact of early coffee gatherings. But local oral traditions, less polished, more honest, remember these moments, how coffee changed not only the night, but the rhythm of human interaction. Historians still argue whether these early communal rituals were religious, cultural, or simply social necessity dressed in ceremony. You think the answer is obvious: it was all three. One quirky moment arises when a shepherd offers to trade a particularly well-behaved goat for a regular supply of beans. Brother Abel negotiates him down to 2 sacks per month and a very nice spoon. That goat, by the way, becomes the monastery's unofficial mascot. The novices name her Sister Kaldi. The elders begin to soften. Even Brother Johannes starts lingering longer by the fire, sharing cautionary tales of past winters, or reciting psalms with a subtle rhythm that suggests he's enjoying himself more than he'll ever admit. One night he stands, clears his throat, and offers this: "Perhaps the Lord didn't create coffee, but he certainly allowed us to roast it." It earns a round of polite applause and a refill. You notice other changes too. A boy from the village brings a hand-drawn map to the prior, eager to trace how coffee might reach other monasteries. A woman offers to sing in exchange for a second cup, her voice floating across the courtyard like incense. Someone begins etching notes on how many beans to use per pot, how long to roast, when to pour. A tradition is being codified, not rigid, but remembered. And in that remembering, something beautiful blooms. Historians looking back may see this as folklore embellished by time and repetition. But you, sitting with a warm cup pressed between your palms and a tired smile on your face, know better. You've lived it. You've watched a bitter little seed grow into an excuse to listen, to welcome, to laugh. As the last of the guests head home and the fire dims to embers, you stay a moment longer. The night is cool, your cup nearly empty. Someone, maybe the prior, sings a low hymn from the chapel steps. You feel for the first time in years, like the darkness is not something to endure but something to share. And coffee was simply the reason you all sat down together. It was only a matter of time before the recipes started becoming secret. At first, everyone shared. A pinch of ginger here, a drop of goat milk there. A method for stirring clockwise 3 times, then pausing for a breath. These were passed freely, scribbled in the margins of prayer scrolls, or murmured over steaming cups. But lately things have changed. Brother Abel now guards his spice blend, like a monk guards his virtue. He's taken to mixing his ingredients behind a curtain in the corner of the kitchen, whispering to the mortar like it might answer. You once caught a glimpse of dried orange peel and something suspiciously blue. He claims it's divinely inspired, though it might just be elderberry. Meanwhile, Brother Johannes, who swore he didn't even like coffee, has developed a subtle but unrelenting loyalty to a brewing method involving twice toasted beans, a brief prayer to St. Anthony, and an exact water temperature tested with his elbow. He has a secret journal he thinks is hidden under his mattress. Everyone has read it. No one tells him. Mainstream historians recognize this stage in the evolution of nearly every food ritual. Once the basics are established, people get competitive. Recipes become identities. Preferences become personality traits. Historians still argue whether the early Ethiopian monks really fought over spice blends, or if this is a colorful exaggeration from later centuries. But knowing your brothers, you're convinced it's absolutely true. One evening, tensions come to a sleepy head. 3 monks produce competing brews and insist on a blind tasting judged by the prior. He sips each with grave seriousness, as if determining the fate of the universe. His verdict: they all taste like coffee. A collective groan rises from the courtyard. But behind the teasing lies a deeper truth. The act of brewing, refining, and defending these recipes is no longer just about staying awake. It's become a form of expression, a quiet art. One monk pours his coffee thick and strong, the flavor punching like a hymn at dawn. Another brews his so delicately it tastes like fog at first light. You try them all, and each one tells you something about its maker. A quirky moment occurs when a group of novices attempt to invent a dessert coffee using crushed dates and goat cream. It's ambitious, sweet, strangely sour, and described by Brother Abel as what regret would taste like if it wore perfume. It is, of course, immortalized in the recipe scroll of successes and disasters under the name "The Night We Questioned Everything." Still, the experimentation doesn't stop. If anything, the secrecy adds a playful tension to evening gatherings. Cups are offered with mysterious smiles and phrases like, "This one only works during full moons," or "best enjoyed while facing north." You take notes, though you're not entirely sure if anyone is serious. And perhaps that's the point. Coffee has shifted from fuel to folklore. You've moved past the utility of wakefulness into the wonder of creation. Every cup is now a story, a fingerprint, a reflection of its maker's hopes, stubbornness, or sense of humor. You realize something else too. These rituals, these recipes are being passed down. The youngest novices now speak of Brother Johannes's roast and Abel's dusty sunrise like inherited relics. They whisper about modifying them, building on them, honoring and playfully tweaking the old ways. The lineage is forming right before your eyes. And as you sip tonight's latest brew, a surprisingly good blend involving toasted barley and mint, you smile at the thought that one day someone far from here might still be roasting, still tweaking, still telling tales of a monastery in the highlands where bitter beans and quiet laughter reshape the night. The evening wind carries with it the scent of roasted beans and pine smoke, as it always does now. But tonight, something else hangs in the air: expectation. The courtyard is more crowded than usual, and not just with monks. Pilgrims have come. Traders too. Even a few curious children from the nearby village clinging to their parents' robes, eyes wide at the spectacle of so many robes, so much steam, and the mysterious grown-up scent of coffee. They've heard the stories, of course. The ones that drift down the mountains and across the valleys. Tales of a drink that grants the strength to pray all night, that sharpens the tongue and sweetens the mind, that turns silent monks into storytellers, and turns prayers into poetry. You remember the first time you tasted the bitter brew. The surprise. The way the world tilted, not with force, but with clarity. And now, looking around, you see that same flicker in the faces of the newcomers, as they cradle their clay cups in 2 careful hands. The prior welcomes them with a nod and a gentle smile. No grand sermon, no dramatic gesture. Just warmth, Stay as long as you wish, but sip slowly. It's not just a suggestion, it's a tradition. Mainstream history notes that coffee spread from Ethiopia, in waves, by caravan, by ship, by word of mouth. But it often forgets the pilgrims, those who didn't sell it or study it but shared it. Historians still argue whether these early visitors brought coffee to their home regions, or if the seeds were already there waiting. But tonight, you see how easily a cup becomes a story, and how quickly a story takes root. The evening's brew is a blend of old and new, Brother Johannes's classic roast, with a hint of wild mint, a nod to the visiting lowlanders who swear by it. You sip and smile. It's oddly perfect. The flavors don't fight, they dance. Like goats on a hilltop. A quirky moment breaks the stillness when a small boy no more than 6 loudly declares, "It smells like burned soup." The crowd erupts in laughter. Even the prior chuckles. The boy is offered a cup of warm milk and a seat by the fire. You notice him mimicking the older monks, holding his cup with exaggerated reverence. Already the ritual is taking root. As the night deepens, the chanting begins not solemn, but soft and rhythmic, interwoven with the sounds of cups clinking and firewood settling. Someone begins reciting a tale of how the beans were discovered by a monk chasing a goat. Someone else interrupts with a competing version involving a dream, a thunderstorm, and an angel with very strong opinions on boiling temperature. No one minds the contradictions. The truth, everyone agrees, is less important than the telling. You watch as the pilgrims begin to settle into the rhythm of the place. A trader from the coast gently asks if he can bring beans back with him, not to sell, just to share. A woman writes down the steps of the brewing process with delicate care, as if copying a spell. You see your community reflected in their wonder, and you realize this drink, once a curiosity, has become an offering. And you're not just offering flavor. You're offering pause, connection. A way to share the dark hours and come out of them more awake, not just in body, but in heart. It's strange how quickly something sacred becomes routine. What was once a sleepy monastery high in the Ethiopian hills, defined by long vigils, aching knees, and the sound of goats bleating into the night, has slowly turned into a hub of sleepy-eyed travelers, curious mystics, and cautious traders. They arrive dusty and skeptical, and leave caffeinated and smiling. Some take beans. Others take stories. A few simply take the memory of warmth shared in the dark. But lately you've noticed something even more remarkable. The beans are leaving. It starts with Idris, the Sufi mystic, returning months after his first visit, this time with a broad smile and a satchel twice the size. "They loved it," he says, pressing the cloth bag into your hands. Inside, dried cloves, ginger, a handful of unfamiliar brown seeds. In Yemen, we brew it differently. But the heart is the same. Mainstream historical records trace coffee's journey from Ethiopia to Yemen, then to Mecca and Cairo, and eventually beyond. But the part they sometimes skip is this. It didn't travel by conquest or decree or clever marketing. It traveled in satchels and sandals, tucked between pages of prayer books and wrapped in linen beside loaves of flatbread. It moved like memory, quietly, persistently. Historians still argue whether the first beans arrived in Yemen as roasted fruit, whole plants, or raw seeds. Whether they were gifts or trade. Whether they were smuggled or celebrated. You suspect all of those things are true, depending on who was telling the story and what they needed to believe. You begin noticing the monastery's stockpile shrinking faster than usual. At first you blame Brother Abel, but he swears up and down he's only hoarding ideas. Eventually it becomes clear monks and visitors alike are taking small portions for the road. Not to hoard, but to plant. A fringe moment unfolds when one novice declares he's buried 10 beans beneath the chapel fig tree to grow a divine orchard. It doesn't work, of course. But now the fig tree is affectionately called Saint Arabica, and someone hangs a tiny wooden spoon from its branches in tribute. More seriously, a delegation from a coastal monastery arrives one rainy evening, bearing a clay tablet inscribed with a simple request: "May we carry this gift with care." The prior, usually cautious, says yes without hesitation. And so the beans begin their journey, wrapped in oilcloth, tucked beside relics, pressed between woolen tunics, carried by hand beast and boat. And with them, the ritual follows. Reports begin filtering back. A monastery by the sea now roasts its beans over driftwood and adds sea salt. A village along the trade road stirs in ash bark and chants a blessing before brewing. A scriptorium in the mountains uses coffee to stay alert during long scroll translations. Each place shapes the ritual in its own way, but always the heart remains. One quirky moment comes when a letter arrives delivered by a winded boy from the lowlands, containing only a charcoal sketch of a goat, doing a dance and a single word: thanks. The monastery erupts in laughter, and the sketch is pinned to the roasting room wall. You watch this all unfold with a quiet awe. Not pride exactly. This was never about you, but a sense that you were there at the hinge. The moment something small tipped the balance. A bitter berry, a sleepy night, a fire too hot, a story told at the right time. And now coffee, once just a trick to stay awake, is becoming something far bigger than you imagined. A bridge, a prayer, a gift, and the road ahead. Well, the beans are already walking it. As the beans make their way down the valleys and across the coasts, the stories travel with them, shifting, growing, tangling into something richer than truth. You begin hearing versions of the tale you barely recognize. In one, the monks were gifted the beans by a celestial bird with feathers of fire. In another, the brew was discovered during a lightning storm, when a tree full of coffee berries caught fire and rained roasted fruit into the mouths of sleeping mystics. You sip from your cup and smile. None of it's true, not really, but none of it's false either. Mainstream history has always been a little allergic to folklore. It prefers dates, names, places that can be found on a map. But you've come to understand that legends have their own kind of truth. They grow where facts leave space. They carry something deeper than chronology meaning. And the meaning of coffee, it seems, is whatever each new place needs it to be. A village in the east believes it grants second sight. A scribe in the lowlands claims he can hear scripture more clearly when sipping from a clay cup. A caravan merchant passing through insists that if you drink 3 brews before sunrise, you'll remember all your dreams in perfect detail. You test this, of course. It results in one very strange dream about a goat conducting choir practice. Historians still argue whether coffee's early mythology hindered or helped it spread. Some say it distracted from its real value. Others believe the stories were the value, the secret to its lasting power. You think of your own nights beneath the stars, the first beans roasting on an open fire, and decide there's no difference. A quirky twist comes when a young novice begins compiling the tales. He calls it the Gospel of the Bean. It includes exactly 0 verified facts, and about a dozen artistic renditions of Saint Caldi riding a goat through the heavens. The prior, to everyone's surprise, allows it into the monastery's archives on the condition that a real history be written alongside it. You're assigned the task. You agree, but quietly include 3 of your favorite goat-related legends in the footnotes. The duality of coffee lore becomes part of your daily rhythm. There's the roast, the real, practical, perfectly timed brew that keeps prayers sharp and hands steady. And then there's the legend, the glowing embroidery you wrap around the cup as it's passed from one hand to another. You find yourself telling both versions now, never quite distinguishing where one ends and the other begins. The people who visit you now don't just want beans, they want the story. They want to hear about the first sleepless night, the goats that wouldn't stop dancing, the accidental roast, the cautious sip, the reluctant grin on Brother Johannes's face. And you tell it all, even the parts you suspect you've embellished over the years. Because in the telling, the ritual deepens. And the best part, the stories are spreading faster than the beans. You receive a letter hand-delivered by a Sufi traveler. It's written in beautiful script and simply reads, "We drink your prayer now. Thank you." You carry it in your robe for weeks, pulling it out during moments of doubt, or when someone asks again, why you still insist on roasting the beans by hand. Because it matters. Because this began with stillness and song with goats, and sleepless monks with bitter berries and warm firelight. Because sometimes history needs a legend to remind it why it matters. And somewhere out there someone is sipping their first cup listening to a story that ends with, and that's how the night got a heartbeat. There's a quiet shift in the monastery that you don't notice at first. It's not in the chants or the chores, it's in the pace. Everything is still structured, of course. The bell still rings before dawn. The prayers are still chanted in their ancient, careful rhythm. But somewhere in between the tone has changed. The monks smile more. The novices hum while sweeping the courtyards. The conversations linger just a little longer after meals. You realize the long nights don't feel so long anymore. And coffee. It's no longer an oddity or an indulgence. It's simply part of you. You sip in the same spot each evening now, just beyond the kitchen under the gnarled fig tree that's been unofficially rebranded Saint Arabica. A small wooden cup hangs from one of its branches, carved with the names of every monk who's contributed a recipe. Even Brother Johannes allowed his name to be added, though he insisted on using only initials. Let the tree guess, he muttered. It's not just a drink anymore. It's a ritual, a rhythm, a relationship. You've begun referring to each batch by name, the stormy one for when the beans roast too dark, the gentle wake, your favorite morning blend, and regretful midnight, a mint-cinnamon experiment that should never be repeated. Mainstream history, with all its neat lines and timelines, may never capture this part of the journey, the slow weaving of coffee into the monastery's bones. Historians still argue whether these highland monks truly brewed the first coffee or merely preserved it long enough for others to notice. But in your heart, you know the answer doesn't matter anymore. Because the truth is everywhere now. It's in the footprints of traders who stop for a refill and leave with a story. It's in the prayer books smudged with oil and roasted dust. It's in the soft murmurs of travelers who gather at the outer wall each night waiting for a cup and a tale. A quirky tradition starts when someone accidentally spills coffee during morning prayers. Instead of scolding, the prior simply raises his brow and says, "An offering." From that point forward, the first drop of every new batch is poured onto the roots of Saint Arabica. Just a splash, just enough to say thank you. Even the goats seem calmer these days. One in particular, Sister Caldi, has developed a habit of sitting near the roaster's head, tilted as if judging the aroma. She's a favorite among visitors now, and the source of a new story involving prophetic dreams and a talking bean. The novices are already planning to include it in the next edition of the Gospel of the Bean. As evening settles in, the fire crackles softly, and the sky blushes lavender and gold. You watch your brothers pass cups and jokes, the steam rising like incense between them. No one rushes. No one yawns. And you understand this was never just about staying awake. It was about staying connected to the night, to each other, to the rhythm of breath and heat and silence. Coffee gave you the gift of attention, and attention in turn has given you a different kind of peace. As the stars blink into place above the hills, you take another sip, close your eyes, and wonder what other small, strange miracles are waiting to be discovered when the world is quiet enough to listen. Dawn comes softly, as it always does here, brushing the hills in hues of ash and gold. The fig leaves glisten with dew. The clay path still holds the night's chill. And the air, well, the air carries that now familiar scent. Wood smoke, cool earth, and the first gentle swirl of freshly brewed coffee. You sit with your final cup of the night, though oddly, it doesn't feel final. Just part of the turning rhythm. The monks around you are quieter this morning, not with fatigue, but with reverence. A kind of peaceful stillness has settled into the stone walls, into your bones. The prior leads the final vigil with slow, even syllables, and for once, no one nods off. Not because you're all brimming with energy, but because you've learned how to be present. You look down at your cup. It's simple, earth-colored. a small chip on the rim. It's seen dozens of brews, perhaps more. The handle is smooth from so many dawns just like this one, and in it, steam curling up like incense is the drink that started as an accident, became a tool, grew into a story, and blossomed into something sacred. Mainstream history will remember the facts that the beans traveled to Yemen, were embraced by Sufi mystics, and eventually poured across continents. That merchants carried them east and west. That coffee houses became dens of debate, rebellion, and poetry. Historians still argue whether the humble monks of Ethiopia were the first, or merely the most persistent. But what they may never fully capture is this quiet morning, this shared stillness, this gentle ritual of togetherness. The way one bitter little berry helped you greet the dark with curiosity instead of dread. The way it brought laughter into long nights and conversation into cold stone halls. The way it taught you that miracles aren't always loud, they can arrive as quietly as steam rising from a cup. A quirky final note: the novices have begun carving a new bench beneath Saint Arabica. It's nothing fancy, just wood and nails. But they've engraved a phrase on the back, words first spoken by Brother Johannes after his third cup one sleepless night. Not a potion, just a prayer you can sip. And so the night ends. Or perhaps the day begins. You sip. You breathe. You listen to the birds begin their chorus from the trees beyond the wall. The monastery exhales with you. Whatever happens next, whether the beans reach kings or vanish in time, whether your stories are remembered or buried beneath legend, you'll always know this. Once in a quiet stone monastery nestled high in the hills, you learned how to turn sleeplessness into something sacred. And it tasted like coffee. And now, as the last embers fade and the stars retreat behind the soft blue veil of morning, you can let go of the story. Let your shoulders relax. Let your breathing slow. You're still in that quiet courtyard where the fig tree sways gently in the breeze and the ground is warm from 1,000 footsteps. The cup in your hand is empty now, but the calm it brought lingers. The monks have gone back to their duties. The pilgrims are packing their satchels, and even Sister Caldy has wandered off to nap beneath a sun-dappled stone. The world is waking up. But you, my friend, are ready to drift the other way. Let the rhythm of roasting fire and whispered prayers rock you gently. Let the night's laughter echo faintly in your thoughts like the cooling ring left by a clay cup. The journey has ended, not with a shout, but with a sigh. You are warm. You are safe. You are welcome. Nothing more is needed. Nothing else must be done. You've traveled across centuries, through legend and fact, through hills and herbs, and the humble curiosity of sleepless monks. And now all that remains is stillness. So close your eyes. Let the last notes of this tale cradle you. Sleep well, dear listener, and dream sweetly of coffee.